everyone, and welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. This is the place where you get to call in and talk to two trans people about all your questions, anything and everything trans-related. We want to hear what you have to say, whether you are an ally with maybe a trans partner and you don't know how to broach certain topics and be respectful, or if you maybe want us to debate some sort of point on trans healthcare or the nuances of trans rights. We are willing to talk to you, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be nice to you the whole time. Just a disclaimer, because people seem to have this thing where if I'm doing this, that I must have to be nice no matter what you say, and that's just not going to be how this works. So I am your host today, Arden Hart, and joined is our regular, our favorite, Dr. Ben. What's up?
I'm working night shift on the labor and delivery deck. I'm heading into night 4 of 6 in a row tonight, and I'm here.
Jeez.
I'm here. That's how I am right now.
Ugh.
Yeah, I just woke up
brutal.
not too long ago. But yeah, no, it's good to be back, though. Hopefully we get some interesting conversations.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here in spite of all that. I probably would have told us to fuck off if I was you, but you know,
I missed you.
Aw,
I missed
you
you
too. Thank
you.
you.
Only you, not Katy. I obviously didn't miss Katy.
Can't stand.
Or Jimmy. Both of them can. No. I love them. We both love them, but we do have to give them some shade every now and then.
We have to bully each other. It's the only way this becomes fun is if there's some friendly ribbing going on, you know. So we are gonna get to calls, but before that, we're gonna go to our polls where we talk about just it can be anything from current events to just what we feel like talking about that day as a way to kind of get conversation started and maybe prompt some calls if people want to call in but aren't exactly sure what to call about. Don't call in just to tell us you like us. Also, priority is always going to go to the more controversial callers. If you're calling for advice, we will try our best to take you, but just a heads up, there's a decent chance that we will not get to your call and you might get dropped after waiting like a whole show. So while we will do our best to take those calls when we have time, again, we don't usually have time. So heads up so nobody gets their feelings hurt or upset. But let's check out these polls we had. So last week's poll was which applies to you, subscribed and transgender, which we have 12%, subscribed and cisgender, not trans, 68%, not subscribed and transgender, 2%, or not subscribed and cisgender, not trans, 18%. Nothing really to dig in on here. Yeah, it's just some demographics.
I mean, it's interesting that we see the majority are cis. That's honestly like a little bit surprising to me because maybe some of our more vocal audience members are trans, and so we kind of see more of that skew in the side chat. But it is interesting to see this poll result. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought for sure that subscribed and trans would beat out not subscribed and cis because we have such a strong trans sect of our audience. But it also is a reminder, I guess, that even when trans topics dominate the news and the media, we are still an extreme minority in the population. People seem to, you know, think because of the disproportionate amount that we are talked about, that we are more significant than we are demographic wise. And I think it's just interesting to see that kind of confirmed again, that even in these spaces where it is very trans friendly and very pro-trans, we are still singled out big time. But also I think that's good because it's an opportunity for every person who has seen the show that I've met in real life, who's come up to me and been like, oh my God, I watched the show, I really appreciate it, has been a cis person with either a child or a family member or someone who's trans who they watch the show to kind of help understand or whatever. And I do think that it's cool that hopefully, since cis people are going to be the ones who are the most indifferent on trans issues or the most uneducated, that we are at least reaching that audience. And those are the people who have their eyes on these videos, because that is meaningful. And that is, I think, the core of how this kind of thing can become activism, you know, getting those messages out to as many people as possible.
Definitely. I for sure agree with that. And I don't have much to add.
Cool. Yeah, there's not a lot to talk about here. So this week's poll, do you want to read this one?
Yeah, federal courts have ruled drag is free speech and bans on it are unconstitutional. Do you think this is the right call? Yes or no? I mean, this pretty straightforward thing, at least in my opinion, that it is unconstitutional to ban drag just as a whole. Like I do know, I guess for context for people that may not be tracking all of this, like there's been debates about particularly people have said that because drag is often sexual that it shouldn't be allowed, which is such a weird take considering that we already have like spaces for like sexualized entertainment. Like that's a thing we have in
Right.
cis culture as well. And the fact that people think that that's okay, but having drag is not okay and is somehow different than this other type of explicit content is just like wild to me.
Yeah.
But I don't know your thoughts on this.
I mean, pretty similar. People might be wondering why, we're talking about this here, because people who do drag are typically not trans. I say the most dominant demographic that I see are cis gay men. Although there's a lot of gender fluidity and genderqueer and trans people in the drag space, I still think it's predominantly cis gay men that I see. That said, the reason this is relevant is because I don't remember the exact wording of the law that got smacked down with this federal hearing, or this federal court hearing. It essentially was very, very vague on what counted as drag. And so a lot of people were speculating and fearing that any situation where the state would deem you a man who is dressed as a woman, or even a woman dressed as a man, I suppose, could be deemed sexual content, which would encompass trans people, even though what trans people do is objectively not drag. Drag is a performance art. And while there is a gender bending, there is like a hair in my eye and it is driving me crazy. Goodness gracious. Drag is a performance art. And while there's a lot of gender fuckery going on in drag, it is not inherently related to trans people. And drag does have a very deep connected history with trans people. That is where a lot of trans women first got the footing to have a public, relationship with the community as trans women. They often called them queens. They are not necessarily related. So that a lot of people were fearing that this law, specifically the Texas law, was going to result in people incriminating trans people for existing publicly on the street and deem them sexual in nature. And I don't think this is completely unjustified because the Heritage Foundation, is it the Heritage Foundation? It's a super conservative PAC, like think tank situation, released their presidential like plan or whatever. And part of it included defining all incidents and expressions of transgenderism as pornographic and sexual. So it's not completely irrational to think that the state might intend to do this. Especially in these more conservative-leaning states like Texas and Florida. And I don't think that this precludes other bans from being worded right going through. But this particular bill, as worded, would violate the free speech of drag queens. And I think it'd be pretty hard to word a bill in such a way where it wouldn't violate free speech. But I don't think that means that they're going to stop trying.
Oh, they're definitely going to keep trying. It's just hilarious how they seem to want to be exempt from their own rules on this stuff. Like, it's hilarious and also just kind of sad at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people were pointing out at the Republican debates last night, Ron DeSantis had a crew member come up and pat his face full of makeup, and it's kind of like, it's really interesting to see where they draw the lines and who gets a pass on doing arguably gender atypical behavior, and who gets criminalized for it, right? These laws are clearly designed not to actually protect children or to deal with sexual content. They're designed to incriminate and to discriminate against queer people. But
didn't you know didn't you know that dresses and skirts are biologically female? And
I heard that.
if you were XY and you were to wear a skirt, you will just spontaneously combust because it's biologically incompatible.
That's true. That definitely works that way.
Yeah.
So if you want to vote on that poll, you can go to our channel and go to the community page, and that's where all of these polls get posted. You should go definitely vote so that next week we can talk about it. I think I already saw it was like 97% yes when I checked on it right before the show started. So no surprise that most of our audience, and I think most people would argue that it's free speech, but it was up for debate in the Republican sphere. So we do have some calls lining up, but we also have some open lines. So if you are in the audience and you would like to call in, the number is 720-619-2288. Or there is also a link in the description for web calls if you want to call internationally. That is a way to do that toll free. So get those calls in. We want to hear what you have to say. But until then, let's just take them in order because there's nothing particularly spicy yet. So we're going to talk to Drew in Oklahoma. Pronouns are he, him. Drew, you are live on Transatlantic. What's going on?
I was just curious and wanted to call in if you had ever heard about gender apathy as a concept or the like. From what I understand, it's where a person either doesn't care about their gender identity or doesn't have a strong connection to it. I think the two are like both under the umbrella but separate versions of it. And I just hadn't heard you talk about something like this before, so thought it would be an interesting topic.
Yeah. Ben, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I guess like there's a few different ways we can approach this kind of discussion. I'm almost curious if there's a specific question that you have related to it, so we can.
No, I do not have a specific question.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, because it's definitely gender in itself is a very complex thing. And we can have all kinds of different, very in-depth discussions about how much gender you really need to have in a society and like what would society look like without gender, and like do you need to raise your children with a gender identity, and like there's a lot of conversations about that, and there are some people who are even more so beyond like the gender apathy and even on the side of like gender abolitionism, and that's a whole other thing too. As far as like gender apathy, like totally valid.
I understood.
Like everybody has their own thoughts about gender and how they look at gender and if they want to acknowledge gender. Yeah, what did you want to say?
Oh, I was just saying I understood gender apathy as an identity more than like as a philosophy. I'm sorry if I didn't explain that right. So it was like people
I
who
haven't
are
heard
gender
apathy as an like when I hear this as an identity, I hear it more as agender, like an agender kind of under the non-binary spectrum. I have friends who identify as agender, and it's not. I guess some of them may describe it as not necessarily caring about gender. Other people will just say they just don't have a connection to any gender identity. But I guess the terms differentiated between like gender apathy, I consider it to be more of like a position, and like agender to be more of an identity. But I'm not that kind of person, so I can't speak on behalf of any agender people or people that may like more closely identify with those terms. But that's at least as far as I understand it. That's kind of what I've heard from my friends who use those terms. I don't know if Arden has heard different things.
Yeah, no, I think I've heard more similar to what you're saying, Ben, where gender apathy is more of the like philosophical concept behind the experience of being agender. Although I also think there's a distinction, because I know people who are like you're saying agender, non-binary, who would say they experience gender apathy, but I've also heard cis people who would not consider themselves trans and probably wouldn't wear it as an identity label, who would say that they experience gender apathy as well.
Yeah, I think I'd heard it from that way before, and I thought it seemed like a position that might fit me, and I thought it might tie into my autism somehow. But
Yeah.
so I just
that's
wanted to hear opinions.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. I think to me, I almost feel like I experience a little bit of gender apathy now that I am mostly identified in the public as female. Like, I experience gender dysphoria when people identify me as male, but I definitely don't experience like euphoria for me, at least when people gender me correctly. It's just like, it's more like the relief of like terrible. I've used this analogy before. I'm going to use it again. I'm sorry. It's so awful, but it's like when you're taking a massive shit and you finally push that thing out and you're like, oh, it doesn't feel good. It feels like relief from like the discomfort you felt earlier. That's what it feels like to be, at least for me, to be gendered correctly. It's not like, ooh, I'm all warm and fuzzy. They called me she and a woman. It's more of like, now it's not like this scratching on the keyboard in my mind to just operate in the public. Like now I can be apathetic to gender. But
Yeah, like it's
that's
the
probably not the same
expectation.
thing. Yeah.
Like you're, I would agree with Arden in that, like, at the beginning, sure, you get the warm and fuzzies of like every time somebody genders you correctly. But yeah, there comes a point where like it's the expectation that people refer to you in a certain way. And so there's a lot of times I just don't even think about my gender anymore. And I'm sure the majority of trans people like go a lot of their time not explicitly thinking about it. I don't know, Drew, if you have any additional thoughts on that.
No, that was all. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you so much, Drew. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. All right. Nice quick one. All right. So coming up next, we have Jack in Essex who wants to talk about Russell Brand, which this will be interesting. I can see the ways in which this ties to trans issues. So I'm interested to hear what your question is. What's up, Jack?
Oh shit! Hello. Sorry, I didn't realize I was connected then.
No worries.
Oh wait, am I coming through?
Yep, you're through.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah. So obviously, the shit with Russell Brand hit the fan. I can't even remember when. Sometime in the last couple of weeks. Quite frankly, I don't know what year it is. So I was kind of curious. What are your guys' takes on it? Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm not educated enough to probably have an informed take. From what I've seen, the people who have reviewed the documents and the articles that came out seem to be convinced that the evidence is pretty compelling from what I've seen. But I haven't actually read them myself, so I don't know if I feel comfortable saying a strong stance on it. Generally speaking, you know, obviously skepticism is good, but most of the time believe women and take them seriously when they're making claims like this. So
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, it was because to be honest, what kind of threw me was sort of how gender critical people per se were kind of taking it in. I don't know if anyone maybe in the chat's watched Kaylin Conrad's video on this, but
oh no,
yeah, quite a few prominent gender criticals, you know, giving them the benefit of the doubt, let's say, when that's evidently not been their way of handling things in the past. So I guess I was just kind of curious. Yeah, just sort of curious for other people's opinions on it.
Yeah. Ben, do you have thoughts?
No, I'm going to sit back and listen for a second. I'm not going to lie. I have not been on the internet very much lately. So I kind of need to hear some more context before I give any thoughts.
So I have seen some prominent gender criticals coming to the defense of Russell Brand, like EJ Rosetta, and I haven't seen Kaylin's video, but I love them. Kaylin's amazing. Everyone who's here should go watch it because I like Kaylin and everything that I've seen them produce. I think so. Is it? I'm not following Russell Brand's stuff, but I think he does a lot of like naturalistic stuff that is kind of in some ways come off as like anti-trans, right? Where he's like more of a you should do therapy kind of approach rather than medicalizing it. He seems anti-medicine in general to me, anti-pharma. Yeah, so it makes sense to me that the gender criticals would feel the need to defend one of their only allies, or not their only allies, but one of their allies on this topic. And it's not at all surprising to me that it would be antithetical to their values. The gender criticals are notoriously incoherent internally in their own worldview. They believe mutually contradictory things at the same time, all the time, in many different ways. So it's not surprising to me that we would see another example of that. But again, I'm unfortunately not plugged in enough to this specific issue to really feel comfortable taking a firm stance. I just understand that he's been credibly accused by multiple women, one of whom was a minor at the time, of sexual assault. And yeah, that sounds bad to me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing I found quite ironic, really, was there was one. I mean, obviously, someone had to come in with at least Russell Brand knows what a woman is, which when you're having to argue that at least these people, like Russell Brand, Taliban, etc., know what a woman is, maybe you're not onto a good point. But yeah, there was also one, and this is just peak gender critical. It was like, yeah, okay, Russell Brand may have committed sexual assault, but at least he didn't invade, at least he didn't invade female spaces. And it's like, well, what the fuck do you call a vagina then? Because
Yeah.
that's pretty invasive. Like, I'm just saying, like, yeah, honestly, like that. I have to admit, I spend way too much time on Twitter, sort of like reading.
You're
tweets,
in good company.
Oh man, absolute mindfuck. Like, yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
No, I mean,
I was just gonna say I have seen people saying similar things to this. At least Russell Brand knows what a woman is, which is like, if your defense of his ideology is the fact that the people he assaulted were assigned female, that's not a brag on your part. I have also seen like contradicting people being like, oh, I know you would force Russell Brand's victims to refer to him as her if he decided he was a woman in court or something like that. There's lots of... The gender critical movement has depended on taking advantage of current events in a way to make everything about trans issues when they're not. I mean, this is a problem across anti-trans rhetoric to begin with. Matt did a debate against a Muslim at this event a couple weeks ago, and sure enough, I came up and I got misgendered. They talk about the one before that where he did an in-person debate. Trans issues came up as well. They just can't help bringing it up because it's, despite the fact that they are against all of the evidence and the science on the topic, it is the only place that they feel like they can argue from, because there is a large amount of the population who believes misinformation about trans people. And so they can't argue from the points that they're actually supposed to be defending. So they resort to this because they think it's easier, and they get points with a certain crowd on the internet for doing so. It's disgusting. It takes advantage, it's disrespectful to the women who were assaulted. It's disrespectful to trans people who have nothing to do with the situation. It is all around disgusting behavior, and it shouldn't be happening. But unfortunately, when you are, running in a movement of people who want to remove freedoms from an entire group of people, you're going to see disgusting behavior like that. That's the place they're operating from. They're at a baseline wanting to remove human rights from people. It's not surprising to me that they would jump to taking advantage of, a situation where somebody was sexually assaulted to make a political point like that.
Yeah. Right. It's kind of like, it's of course the area right now that people feel like is a gateway to some of these other conversations. Like, of course, the end goal is removing rights from a lot of groups of people. And unfortunately, trans people are like the most likely to have people want to take away their rights. So it's like, it's less acceptable for people to be like, yeah, I don't think women should be able to vote. Like, a lot of people may have that viewpoint, but like, they know if they voice it, they're going to be called out on it much more likely than if they say something against trans people. So it's like, I guess it's their foothold to find some allyship in on their side, and then they can kind of smuggle in some more of those controversial points and get more people leverage in that direction. It's absolutely like dishonest tactics, and I wish people would stop doing it. And like Arden was saying, like kind of looking at this just kind of for the first time now, it's just very odd that they're even making this about trans issues. Like as a whole thing, it does not seem to be related. I might be wrong, but it just doesn't seem relevant at all. And it's just, I'm very confused about the whole thing. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I mean, obviously, I'm from the UK. Fucking shoot me. But I mean, like you mentioned about sort of trans people being the easy target, almost like a gateway kind of bigotry. Again, I don't know if you maybe saw this in passing on Twitter, but our Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, she made a comment a couple of days ago, a day ago maybe. It was like literally recent. She was targeting refugees, which is, again, a sort of Venn diagram being a circle with transphobes. They tend to be of the racist category too.
Yep.
And she was saying, she made a comment about refugees lying about being gay to, get asylum over here. And it's like, hang on, so you're claiming that someone's lying about something for nefarious reasons to attack others. Where have I seen this before? It's fucking terrifying, honestly.
I did see that.
Yeah, honestly, it's horrific.
Yeah. I wish we could offer more, Jack. I'm unfortunately just not read up on this issue. I try to limit the things that I dig too deeply into. And when I heard a few people who I trust who had read the article saying it's pretty bad and it looks pretty convincing, I was like, that's enough for me. If at the end of the day, he's going to probably have his time in court and is going to get a fair trial. And if it turns out that he's innocent, then fine, I'll be happy to revise my position. But I'm not interested in coming to Russell Brand's defense just because I don't know the information or anything like that. It's just kind of one of those things where I'm going to be like, I don't know, not educated on the situation.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
Cool.
But
go ahead.
Sorry. But yeah, no, that, to be honest, that was all I was sort of curious about, really. But thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for calling in. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Real quick, before we move on to the next calls, we do have some open lines. So that number is 720-619-2288. If you would like to talk to us, you can call that number, or you can click on the web link in the description. That is a toll-free international number, so that is a way you can get in contact with us if you are not from the US and you don't want to pay tolls, which totally makes sense. Also, at the end of the show, we like to read out your super chats, so if you are too chicken shit to call in, just kidding, or if you just want to support us, you can send a $5 super chat or more, and we will read it live here on air at the end of the show, so that is a way you can get your message read. And last but not least, I got to run you down what the schedule on the line is. So if you don't know, while Transatlantic is the best and the only show you should really watch on this network, there are technically other ones if you want to waste your time. For example, we've got the Sunday show this coming weekend. Well, it's normally Matt and Jimmy. This weekend, it's going to be Jimmy and Forrest at 2 p.m. Central Time this Sunday. So I'm sure that'll be good fun. Then we actually, it looks like we don't have anything scheduled out for next week. And that's because it's next month. Usually we do our... scheduling about a month at a time. So we haven't scheduled October yet, but we're going to have, as usual, Skeptalk at 6 p.m. Central Time on Monday, Dying Out Loud at 6 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday, assuming Dave is feeling better. The Hang Up Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central Time, and then Thursday, back here, Takis at 2 p.m. Central Time next week. So stay on the lookout for all of that, and support us on Patreon, patreon.com/calltheline. Now that I'm done being a filthy shill, we've got more callers on the line. So let's talk to Bada in Mississippi. Pronouns are they, them. I feel like I probably pronounced that wrong, but I don't know how many ways to pronounce it. So Bada in Mississippi, pronouns are they, them. You are live on Transatlantic. What's going on?
Hi, you got it right.
Sweet.
Um,
What do you want to talk about today?
yeah, I wanted to ask how you guys identified gender dysphoria in yourselves at the start of your journey to maybe help me figure out if I can tell if I am or not.
Sure. Yeah. So it's really easy to get in the situation where you get so used to living with it that you kind of become numb to it happening to you. I know Katie's used a really great analogy of if you are tied to a rock upside down and you live your whole life like that, it might be confusing to you how other people feel so normal. And then when you get flipped back right side up, you're like, oh my God, can't believe I was upside down the whole time and didn't even realize it. For me, it was a lot easier to know that I wasn't a boy than for me to say that I was a girl. It was just little things. I mean, throughout school, I tried to do things with the girls, painting my nails, growing my hair longer, wanting to play those parts in games that all the girls got to play, like, you know, house, being a mom and things like that, and getting a lot of social rejection on that basis. I also had a very religious environment, so being handed some very clear-cut gender roles and expectations also made it clear that to do feminine things as a boy was bad, and so I internalized that very deeply. But it was pretty hard to miss the distress that I experienced when I was grouped up with boys, or when my dad would want to go on like an ice fishing trip with his friend and that guy's son, and they would be doing man talk, and I would feel gross and like I was in like a foreign country with people who I didn't know, who were saying awful things about people like me, and I was like, this feels so wrong and gross, but I can't exactly articulate why. And really, it took a process of trying to undo a very deeply entrenched shame complex of whether or not I'm a woman, whether or not I'm trans. Maybe I would like to have long hair and be feminine. You know, whether or not I'm trans or a woman, maybe I would like to remove facial hair. And kind of in exploring that area where it was a little less black and white and a little bit more about how I felt, it was a lot easier to uncover that these feelings are rooted in a sense of gender dysphoria and to then go about treating it. But Ben, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I had kind of similar experiences, just like different baggage from my past, because we both came from opposite sides of kind of the cis indoctrination that you get as a kid, like of the gender roles. But I think for me, like a lot of why I was kind of delayed in figuring out I was trans, it wasn't, well, a lot of it was because I wasn't even allowed to know that trans people existed. But besides that point, like trying to iron out if it was that I was a masculine woman and just wanted to present more masculine, or if I actually wasn't a woman and was either non-binary or was a trans man. And like that was kind of hard for me to iron out a little bit. Because I know, at least from the masculine side, like it's often more socially acceptable to be a masculine woman than it is to be a feminine man. So, which is even debatable because, like, on the surface of society, they often say that it's socially acceptable to be a masculine woman, but then really, if you break that down, it's actually not. It's just because if you're a masculine woman, you often face a lot of social consequences. But like, trying to figure that out for myself, kind of what pushed me over the edge a little bit was, like, I know Arden was talking about different games and like her wanting to play different roles, and that, like, mine was kind of the same way. Like, I would be in like MMORPGs, like playing as a male character, but then I would also be in like the chats and like basically pretending I was a guy. And like, I really, like, I had all those interactions with other people where they had no idea who I was, what my background was. And I would leave those interactions. I'd be like, that'd be cool if that was real. And then I'd go back to living as a cis woman for all I knew. And like looking back, I'm like, that was definitely me like trying to find a way to be myself and not feeling like I had the support to do that in real life. But like, it's such a weird thing to iron out. Like, is this gender dysphoria or is this something else? Because of the fact that our society has we have such a binary view of gender, of course, and we have such a connected view of gender and sex and like all of that. So I do think it's very difficult to separate out like what is a societal role issue versus what is an identity issue versus like all these other things. And I don't know if there's a super great way without kind of individual experimentation to figure out like which components are distressing to you and which ones aren't. And there might not be any components that are distressing at all. And that's totally okay. Like I'm seeing a lot of language shift, especially in the medical field where it needs to happen, of shifting the standard from gender dysphoria to gender incongruence, which is great. And it might be that you're having gender dysphoria. And like, it's hard to sit here and talk somebody through this because there's absolutely no way that Arden and I could know what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. And I think it's unfair for either of us to tell you what you're thinking and feeling. But like, I think if you want to investigate more, like that's something I hope you have the environment to do that, and to like, even if you want to go into an online space more anonymously portraying certain social roles or whatever, and feel like that might help you find some answers, like that's totally an option. I know it's kind of the limiting step is finding ways to experiment that are safe. And I don't know your exact situation, but that's kind of what helped me. And you heard what Arden had to say. And I think a lot of people have very different experiences just based on them. So I don't know if any of that helps.
It kind of does. I've had experiences similar to both sides from both of y'all. And I'm going to be talking with my therapist more on it next week. But it feels a little difficult because I know my partner wouldn't judge me for it for even half a second, but I work a very, typically masculine facing job and with a bunch of masculine people in a very large masculine body type, and it's terrifying to explore that without the possibility of being judged for it, especially in the South.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna give you one thing to think about with regard to that. So when I was early in my transition, I really, really was paralyzed by kind of what you're talking about, this fear of being judged and being evaluated, mostly because of trauma I experienced on the basis of being trans, that, violence could happen, or that, I would be humiliated or whatever. And ultimately what I found to be helpful for me was to accept the fact that people might judge you, and people might think, that person, they're dressing atypically, that's weird to me, or something, or they're presenting their gender in a way that I'm not comfortable with, that's weird to me. That is almost an unavoidable and inevitable part of being trans in our current society. And I don't say that to make you feel hopeless. I say that to hopefully give you the sense of there's no point in paralyzing yourself with the fear of people judging you, because people are judging all the time. But also, it's okay if they judge you. If they judge you, that makes them suck. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be allowed to dress in a way that makes you feel seen as who you are and access public spaces. Trans people shouldn't have to hide and not be who we are because we don't conform to society's expectations of how somebody of a certain gender should look or be. You still get the right to do your job and to, go to the grocery store and go to your therapist and to do all the things that a person needs to do to be well and functional in society and to take up that space as a trans person. And you are allowed to do that. And the last thing that I'll tack on to that is a reminder that while people may judge you, and they will judge you, also probably a much smaller fraction of them will do that than is actually what you're afraid of. And I say that because most people are so wrapped up in their own life. They are not paying attention to the people around them in a lot of situations. Like, there's literally a scientific experiment where if somebody goes up to a cashier to check out with their stuff, and as the cashier drops behind the cash register, a different cashier pops up, a significant portion of people will literally not even notice. It won't even register in their brain that a totally different person just checked them out and pretended to be the same. Like, most people are very, very wrapped up in their own story. So it's kind of like, those seem mutually exclusive, but they're not. People will judge you, but that's okay. And it doesn't mean you have to stop being who you are or stop taking up space. And most people are going to be too wrapped up in their own bullshit to even consider that you are an entity in the same space as them. And that might be terrible advice for you. And maybe you're going to be like, wow, now I'm way more anxious. Why did you say all of that? For me, that I found very freeing to know that people are going to judge you, and that's okay. It doesn't make me less me. People have the right to think that I have blue eyes. I don't. But they have the right to think that and go home and tell all their friends that they met Arden Hart, who has blue eyes. That they're allowed to do that. It doesn't make it true. But, people are allowed to be wrong and cruel, unfortunately. But it shouldn't stop you from being who you are, how they feel. Now, I absolutely understand the fear of violence being an inhibitory factor in you pursuing medical transition or whatever you want to do for transition. But I hope it doesn't stop you from just owning who you are, because people are going to judge and they're allowed to, but it doesn't have any bearing on who you are, or how valid your transness is. Anyway, I hope that was helpful and you're not like, well, now I have a huge fucking panic attack brewing.
No, it was very helpful. Thank you very much.
Cool. Well, if you want to try all those things out and call us back in, a month or two when you feel like you've gotten a little bit more of your footing on all of this, we would love to hear from you and hear how that advice panned out and if it was useful or if you found a different approach that was more useful. All of that would be really great.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Bada. Have a nice day. All right. Okay, we have got 2 callers on the line. One of them is going to be good. Both of you who are on the line, let me pull down that caller banner. Both of you who are on the line right now, stay on the line. I want to get to both of you. You both sound like very interesting calls. I'm going to take Benjamin first because he's been on the line slightly longer. So Benjamin in Texas, pronouns are he, him. You are on the line. What's going on? Ooh.
Yes, I've called in a few months ago.
Okay.
And it's nice to see y'all again and such. And so I live in the very wacky big state of Texas where they have anti-drag laws. And so now I know that's not what everyone thinks here, but I want to know why people so get up in arms on drag, that is, at least from our POV.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you saw the beginning of the show, that bill was stopped by a federal judge, but the heart of your question is kind of irregardless of that bill, whether it's in effect or not. There's a lot of reasons. In general, in America, and I think this applies to most of the Western world, but minorities, it is a very convenient way to marginalize people and to mobilize a voter base to vote often even against their own self-interest to further marginalize that person, to depict them as inherently sexual or other. That is a tactic that has been used against people of color. It's been used against gay people since the gay liberation movement started, and it's now used against trans people and any form of gender diversity. It is a tale about as old as time, really, this tactic. And it's pretty effective, too, as you can see. I mean, despite the fact that they use the same fucking language every time, they successfully tend to mobilize a movement, often decades long, of people having an issue with a certain group of people. And to them, they can't... Now, there's a little bit of speculation going on here, but the heart of why that law was passed is because they can't conceive of a way in which somebody would dress as a gender that they are not on stage for other people to see if it wasn't for some sort of sexual perversion. That's basically the content of the law, is that sexual content should not be in front of children. The law, I believe, doesn't actually very well define what drag is, but it was vocally in all of the hearings about drag. It was about sexual content in front of children is what the bill explicitly was about. So that's really where the root of it is that I can see. This is an attempt to further marginalize a group by depicting them as sexual deviants and dangerous to our children and to the health of our society. Because that is a really strong mobilizing factor to get people to ignore that when they vote for those same politicians, they increase the federal deficit and they, might make things worse for like the working class. It's a very effective strategy. Do you have any thoughts, Ben?
Right. Yeah. And with that, like, pretty much every act of like gender deviance is taking at least a little bit of power away from the patriarchy and the way that society is structured. Like, kind of our structure relies on cis men being seen as inherently better, inherently more capable, inherently this and that, so that they can have the benefits of power and social capital without really having to work for it. They want to be granted that just by default, just by being them. And what any gender deviance, gender nonconformity does is it shifts the viewpoint on this issue and says, hey, this isn't something that's inherently meant to, like, it's not inherently better to be masculine versus feminine. And like, so it takes away this idea that because you were born a man, that you're going to be just granted all this stuff, because they cannot see a reason why someone who was assigned male, who would be gifted all this social capital, would ever want to be feminine, because it's like downgrading yourself in society, because they see this as a permanent social hierarchy. Whereas kind of from the flip side, if you are assigned female, of course, it's obvious that you'd want to be a man because you want to gain that social capital. So like they see drag especially as a way to take power away from the system, because once you start questioning that system and decide I'm not going to adhere to this model, then their inherent power, inherent capital just like is meaningless at that point. And I think it should be like your society should not be structured based on just people being granted whatever power because they have certain anatomical features or genetic features. But yeah, like a lot of reasons why they push for so much of this rhetoric is maintenance of this social structure that they've held on to for so long. And it's so many reasons. And I think Arden and I could even sit here probably for days dissecting everything socially with regard to this anti-drag laws. And but because it's pretty extensive, and I think a lot of it is subconscious as well. Like there's of course the very upfront arguments and upfront like transphobia that's happening, but kind of these underlying features of patriarchy is often, I think, in their minds, like not necessarily a conscious thing that they're going off of. Like I think it's something that's been so ingrained in our society for so long, and then they've been essentially socially profiting off of for so long, and they don't realize necessarily that that's they can't let go of it. And they might not necessarily realize that that is their end motive. Some of them might, like some of them probably do. But yeah, there's a lot here, and I could geek out about this for a long time. But either of you have anything else to weigh in on that?
So Arden said something about this being overturned by a federal judge of some sort.
Yep.
I know I'm not up to date on the news and all that, but like they finally deemed this as unconstitutional.
Yes. Let me pull up the exact wording. A federal judge in Texas issued a permanent injunction on Tuesday, and that was of this week, ruling that the Senate Bill 12, commonly referred to as the drag ban, infringes on First Amendment and chills free speech. And then there was some comment in there about how free speech has to include speech that you don't like sometimes. So, yes, that happened on
that's
Tuesday.
the First Amendment.
Yeah.
And so I know not all of it. Not all drag is explicitly NSFW, but I more often not hear that it is. It most definitely is. But like, no, I know not every drag person is innocent, but it's like that doesn't mean they're all criminals also. So I see a lot of people blowing up about it, especially on the right.
It's also not a criminal. Well, it's also not a criminal act. Like the majority of sexual drag content is at like drag bars or like gay bars that are like 18 plus. So like, and I haven't been to a single establishment like that doesn't ID. And like, sure, that's anecdotal, but like the things that are happening at a gay club are very different than what are happening in a library, and they're often conflating the two.
Yeah, I think it's naive. I have seen some people on the left suggesting that like no drag content is sexual, and that this is just like a projection of like cis heteronormative standards of relationships and stuff. And I think that's not true. I think Ben's right that there are absolutely sexualized drag queens, but they're almost always at these 18 plus clubs and bars and things like that, right? And that doesn't mean that children don't end up at those events sometimes. They absolutely do, but that has nothing to do with the drag queen. That has to do with the venue not properly monitoring the people who are coming in and the parents of that kid or the guardians for allowing that to happen. I think that's who those responsibilities should fall on, not at all the performer who is engaging in their free speech, their right to perform and put on a show. But yeah, there's also absolutely totally benign forms of drag where they are no more than a Disney princess at a party to a child, you know?
I know, and it's just blowing it out of epic proportions. And these are appeals to tradition I constantly hear. Like, this must stay the way it is because it's always been this way.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's actually some great stuff in I think it's Whipping Girl from Julia Serrano about the like whole marked social theory, which is that like people who deviate from the norm are often marked. They're considered like remarkable, not in like a positive way, but like they are to be noticed. And all of their behavior gets inherently lumped into these groups, which is kind of what I started with talking about just without mentioning Julia Serrano. So credit to her where that kind of idea came from. But like, well, she probably got it from somewhere before that. But regardless, yeah, I mean, it's always been this way is because they're trying to suggest that. And in some ways, it's true that drag and queer, expressions are different from the way it's always been. But humans have always had queer identities and queer behaviors, what we would consider that now. And it's not remarkable for them to be engaging in them. It's remarkable for this society to tolerate them. And so they tend to lump it all into a sexualized content thing because they can't conceive of why gay people would want to, express their identity so publicly if it wasn't about the sex that they're having. They can't conceive of the fact that gay people and queer people have created an entire culture around, our experiences living in this society, and that we have developed art forms to express ourselves and to embolden ourselves towards more activism and to more freedom of expression. They can't separate it from the one aspect of it that is who your partners are. And they can't separate what they already do from being the same thing, which is how much of our modern media is about straight relationships and straight sex, and how many performances are, have nods to sexual content and sexual activity from straight people that is not controversial and that is not targeted by these bills at all. Tons of it, so much of it. And because humans are not, universally, but humans are in large part sexual beings and sexual entities. And so we like to talk about and think about and engage in sex because we wouldn't exist if we hadn't been fucking for the last, 30,000 years or however long Homo sapiens have been around.
I mean, I'm an ace, but I understand where we come from and all that. And
yeah,
it's just a matter of breaking this intolerance because, well, tolerance is very good in many ways, more than one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know some queer people. Sorry, go on. I don't want to interrupt you.
I know we definitely. The idea of tolerance is what allows LGBTQ plus people to finally flourish and decrease the tragic suicide rates and all that. Yes.
Can you say it again? I missed that. Unless Ben.
That.
No, I just rephrase a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So, I know it's I wish I could pull up my statistics, but tolerance is what we definitely need more of, and that's what's going to decrease the suicide rates among the LGBTQ plus community. Yes, because
sure,
that's what I really meant.
Yeah, I think there's some queer people who would push back on the use of the term tolerance, mostly in that tolerance is kind of what I want from the general community, for sure. Tolerance is what I want from the voters in Texas. But tolerance isn't necessarily the best route forward as far as, what we're advocating for our rights in the government. But I would agree that I absolutely advocate for a tolerance position from people generally. I don't need people to be activists. I don't need people to like gay and trans people or to, show up at pride parades or anything like that. I just need them to acknowledge that we exist here with you. We are just as much members of the American culture and American society as they are. And I just want the right to be able to go about my life unencumbered by your prejudice. You're allowed to be prejudiced and to not like gay people. What you can't do is prevent us from having jobs and access to housing and education and things like that.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to mean. Sorry if my words aren't straight.
That's okay.
Like myself, but
no, it's totally fine. We get picky sometimes about words here, but I appreciate the conversation. I knew what you were talking about, so.
Yeah, at least just, not bashing on those because of their mere existence and you don't like it because it's somehow icky.
Yeah.
Or whatnot. But yeah, definitely need more of that here in Texas.
Agreed.
But that's all I had to say.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Benjamin. We appreciate you calling in, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you, Arden. Thank you,
Ben.
Dr. Ben. Awesome. All right. Y'all have a great day.
You as well. See you later, Benjamin. All right. We're going to keep rolling. This next call, I think, will be very interesting. We're going to pull in Val. Pronouns are any and all from Canada. Val wants to talk about a defense for the use of its pronouns as a pronoun choice. So, Val, you are live on Transatlantic. Give it to us.
Oh, my God. Hello. I'm excited to be here. So, yeah, it and its. To preamble, I'm a non-binary person. I use any and all pronouns, including it and its. And I kind of want to talk about why I came to that and why, even though it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, for some of us, neurospicy and queer spicy or gender spicy, it fits.
Sure.
Yeah, and I've had these conversations with Val before, but so I
Oh, cool.
yeah, I know Val personally. So
Oh, right on.
I'll try to some things that Val and I have talked about in the past, like we might reiterate just for the audience. But yeah, feel free to share your thing.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Like, one, I see it as a reclamation of the cis straight heteronormative culture, using it to dehumanize us, because I know that it is still used to dehumanize it. So it is part of it is to reclaim that. I know a lot of people in drag use it in their performances. I use it. Even though not a lot of people call it me by it and its, I use it, like I was saying before, as a way to identify myself. And I came to that conclusion, sort of like how a lot of us come to conclusions about our gender is through role-playing games. I was playing as basically a cryptid or a monster in a tabletop game, and I was like, y'all, they're a monster. Use it and its, and it resonated with me in a way that I wanted to experiment with it outside of play, right? And when it finally did happen, when I had another queer person call me that, I instantly felt euphoric with it. It was just like, oh, and it wasn't like in sort of in a sex way either. It was just legitimately, like, very casually dropped me as an it, and I was like, yes, absolutely, thank you. It was probably one of the most euphoric feelings I've had, to the point where I prefer it over they and them as a way to identify myself. So, like, I go by, like, she primarily, then it, then they, then everything else I'm apathetic towards. But yeah, and of course the reclamation part is, I'm also a goth, so just out in public, people have called me the it when they see me, so in a derogatory way, and I tend to just thank them for properly gendering me, and I just really like the butthurt that comes along with that, like, to reclaim that, yeah.
So okay. So I have a lot of thoughts about.
It's a lot, I know, and I'm like, my neurospicy just doesn't stop. So sorry.
No, it's cool. I definitely think I totally respect the reclamation motivation, and I also, to be clear, I think it's totally valid to use it and its as pronouns. My thing that I've always had with its is that I personally have a lot of trauma relating to its, and it is extremely difficult for me to, like, vocalize those sounds in reference to a human being. I definitely am not interested in telling you or anyone who uses its pronouns that they're not valid or that that's not your pronouns. And I definitely make an effort to use them. However, it literally feels like I'm being dragged across glass when those sounds come out of me. So that's usually my only pitfall with its pronouns. And I have more complex feelings about neo-pronouns generally that I would love to be able to talk about eventually, although we keep missing calls like that, which is so frustrating. I think it'd be a really interesting topic. And I probably will get more in trouble for my position around there, which isn't too spicy, but it's spicier than this one is that I'm giving you right now on its pronouns. Its I don't find controversial, mostly because it's a part of the English language already, and I think it's pretty easy to adapt for people using it in that way, in that format anyway. The biggest pitfall I think is for me is that experience where it's like, I literally feel like I can't say it out loud, but like, power to you for reclaiming it. I mean, people aren't going to have that trauma response that I have if to them it is just a thing that people get called sometimes and it's not a big deal. I think that is a really powerful form of activism. But yeah, it's like one of those things where I'm like, you crazy kids, you do it. I'm proud of you. I'm gonna try really hard to not stick my foot in my mouth. And that's kind of where I'm at with that.
No, that's understandable. And like when I sort of like introduce myself and I say that that's part of my pronouns, I always like to iterate that I don't expect people to, because I understand the trauma that those words have with the queer community and with other trans and gender spicy people. Like, there is literal trauma about being dehumanized. And like, it's not something that I'm like, you have to call me, these are my pronouns, no matter what, sort of thing, which is why it's like, you can, as we were talking about gender apathy before, it's like, I'm very pronoun apathetic sort of thing, except with those particular ones, I feel nice. Like, there's like that euphoria. And just as valid is feeling like having that trauma as well. It's just more of like, letting, like, just kind of like, for those of people who are unsure about it or feel like they're hurting someone by saying it, or especially the person that likes having those pronouns, like, it's just that reassurance that you're not hurting me if I give you permission, kind of thing. Like, I've consented to that. Yeah.
Totally. No, and that makes sense. And I definitely, even with neopronouns, am on the position of, I think it's going to be a lot easier to get us to a society where, you know, the gender abolished society, if we stop having as many constraints on what people are and aren't allowed to call themselves. That it definitely is like my position throughout all of that. But yeah, I think largely I'm on your side for the defense of it, its pronouns. I mean, we've had Luxander on the show, and I know it goes by it, its pronouns as well. And we even had a little conversation about it after the last time they were on, about how it's like, oh, I really hope this comes up, because I appreciate getting put on the spot about this kind of thing, because that's how I got out of being, you know, the trans medicalist mindset, was being publicly put on the spot about it and kind of having to be like, really evaluate my position, and then being like, okay, yeah, I'm not actually, I don't really have a good foundation for where I'm coming from on this. Yeah, I definitely can't help that it still makes my skin crawl, but I'm never going to tell, you know, you that like, you shouldn't use that, or that I shouldn't use that. Like, I definitely don't think how somebody's pronouns make me feel necessarily trumps what the respectful thing to do for that person is, if that makes sense. So
right. Sure. I'm from the same standpoint. Like, it does make me feel a little bit inside, like, using them, but like at the same time, I want to try to use pronouns. Like, if someone tells me like, these are the pronouns that really make me happy, like, I want to make an effort to use those, because I know it's validating for the other person. I do often with that, like, get into the weird, like, very awkward thing where it's like, you kind of say the thing and then give the little disclaimer of like, no, I'm not being mean, I promise, like, this is what the person prefers. And like, I hate that you kind of have to give a little bit of that disclaimer. I often do, just because it's like, I feel weird about it, and I know the other person sometimes feels weird about it, but I also like want to provide like the same courtesy to you and other people that like I would give to literally anybody else. But yeah, it's interesting, and I definitely want to have more conversations about this, like, with people who use those pronouns, and like, and hopefully we can get to a place in society where we kind of shift the perspective on it, and that would be nice. I know that's kind of asking for a lot, but I know, especially like if we're gonna say that kind of people who disagree with trans people, like if I'm gonna say to them that they should be respectful and use the pronouns I want to use, despite feeling uncomfortable, I like, in order to be honest and consistent, I kind of need to take the same approach with people that use pronouns that I'm not as comfy with. So that's, yeah, I think we're all on the same page here, but I'm happy we're able to have this discussion, and hopefully people in the audience can take something away from that as well.
That was kind of the goal here today. It's just like, you know, it's Ben's here, Arden's here, it's time to talk about it.
No, I appreciate you doing it because I've been wanting this to come up a little bit more directly. It's kind of been like tagged on as an afterthought on a couple calls, or we couldn't really get into it. And I know that my position isn't like as enthusiastically like super like fuck all pronoun nonsense. Like I'm not where people want me to be on that, and I sense that, and so I've been waiting for someone to call in and be a little bit more direct about it. Yeah, and I do stand by that. I think using its pronouns probably does more to disable the dehumanizing power of its pronouns than than any other approach to it. Like it's for sure. It's going to be thanks to people who use its pronouns like you that some trans girl in 10 years, when somebody calls her an it for being out in school or whatever, she's going to be like, actually, no, sorry, my pronouns are she. And like that's all that it's going to register in her brain, And I look forward to that place where we can get to there with that. So
it's all gotta, like, we all have to start somewhere when it comes to just deconstructing how we like I've heard many of y'all said before, like language is prescriptive, not descriptive. So like, I'm prescribing it and its or a neopronoun, which I don't resonate with very well myself either. But I, again, like y'all, respect my neopronoun baddies. But yeah, sorry, my ADHD, where the fuck was I going with that thought? So the normalization is very specific to humanizing it, because so often do we just, like, my best friend is cis and heteronormative, and she refuses to call me by that because she's like, I can't do it because I see you as a person. And I was like, well, I appreciate that, but that does not dehumanize me. Like, I'm letting you know, it does not dehumanize me because I'm not letting the outside world dehumanize me.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it is, and thanks for you're a great person to have this happen with, because you were very receptive to where I'm coming from on it. Because I've definitely had a lot of engagements on Twitter. Granted, Twitter is such a bad place to have these kinds of discussions, but where I was kind of raked over the coals for not being, at a pronoun abolitionist, so to speak. And I completely acknowledge that language changes, and it's going to start with little things like this, and that how I feel about pronouns does not indicate whether they're valid or whether or not someone should use them. But I just feel compelled when it comes up to talk about how it makes me feel, because I think it's good for the audience to see that you can feel uncomfortable with it and be challenged on it, and that I can be wrong about things, and that you don't always have to understand someone or where they're coming from or why they want to identify a certain way to be like, that doesn't mean you're invalid just because I don't necessarily get exactly what would motivate you to do something. Like that should be an irrelevant part of respecting someone.
And on the same page, like, your discomfort is also valid. And from like the perspective of those of us who use those pronouns, we have to understand that discomfort is just as valid, and we have to challenge ourselves to also just be respectful of that, especially when it comes from other queer people. Like when it comes from cis people, whatever. But like we're not here for their comfort. We're here for our rights, right? And our ability to exist safely. But yeah, like that's just as valid, and the conversation like we're having today should have that level of nuance and that level of understanding between not necessarily both sides, because we're all on the same side, but like, just like, hey, like this is more of a conversation than a hashtag, or a retweet or something like that.
Yeah, I super appreciate it. It was a great place to start that conversation. So I appreciate you calling in, Val, and prompting that. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me. I didn't mean to call into the show. I have done it to other shows, but I was like, no, we're up today. Let's do it.
Right on.
Yeah, good to have you.
Well, you have an awesome day, Val, and I hope we hear from you soon.
You too.
Thanks so much.
For sure. Bye.
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 Cool. Well, now I'm sure there are ripples in chat because I was like, I'm not a pronoun abolitionist. I mostly phrased it that way because I want to prompt somebody to call in about it. God damn it. We had a caller like a couple weeks ago, but they waited until it was like 90 minutes into the show to call in. And it was like, well, we can't take you now. Like, call in at the beginning of the show, 2 p.m. Central Time. If you want to talk to, and I really hope you call in on a week where I'm here because I would like to be challenged on this topic regarding, neopronouns in general. Because I think I have a nuanced position that will be satisfying largely to people, but will still not have me where they want me to be yet. So progress, we'll get there together.
But along those lines, like with people calling in at the end of the show, like if y'all want to talk to us, like call in at the beginning of the show or like when lines open, because like it's frequently the case that people all try to call in at the very end, and then you get less time to talk and like less guarantee that you're going to get on. So call at the beginning. It's great.
Yeah. And
we're
actually,
not that scary, I promise.
I did close the lines because we only had one caller left when we hung up with Val, and it's 3:16. So we're going to take this one last caller and then move on to super chats. But yeah, that's a reminder. I will put in the live chat here right now that people are engaging in from the line account, 15 minutes, usually, sometimes 10 minutes before every show, the lines are open. When I do that, that is because I have opened the calls where now you can call and get in on the host queue. So if you want to get in, your best shot is to be here about 15 minutes before the show starts, to wait for that and to call in. Now, granted, you also might have to wait longer if you call in early because multiple people will be calling in. We can't just, know that you're in a rush and pick you. But that is your best chance at getting heard. So, and if I see that topic come up, I'll probably take it like first or second. So, depending on who else we've got there. So anyway, last call of the day, we have Violet, also in Canada. Their pronouns are they, she. Violet, you are, I didn't hit the button. There we go. Violet, you are live on Transatlantic. What's going on?
Hi. What's going on is a lot of good stuff in my life right now. I got SRS coming up, so looking forward to that. And otherwise, getting to work on a bunch of projects that I'm excited for.
Cool. That's really exciting. Congrats on SRS. That's huge. So what did you want to talk about?
9 years of waiting, so it got bigger and bigger the longer I had to wait. So
I'm sure it feels bigger every year that passes. So what did you want to bring to the topic today?
Okay, so I called in about this before. What ended up happening was basically I called in when Ben wasn't available, and it's a question that's definitely aimed towards Ben because it's more of the scientific side than it is sociological. Basically, there's an issue I've noticed with most of the research that I've been able to read about trans stuff, in that almost all of it seems to be about trying to validate trans existence, which is obviously important, but like we have every major medical organization in the US and most of the world agreeing. So at this point, that's a pretty settled question, but what we don't really have is the boring research, which is stuff like if medicines are impacted based off of being trans, or the ways HRT impacts potentially other conflicting therapies that you might be taking at the same time. And I was curious to know.
We actually do have some good research on that. Like, and granted, there's still a lot coming out, but the problem is people aren't talking about this stuff in the common public because it's not super relevant to the majority of people. But kind of behind the scenes in the medical world, we're talking about this a lot already. And there is a lot. I actually just did recently a PICO project. Just kind of, if people don't know what that is, like you basically how you answer a clinical question for yourself, that if you were to see something in clinic that was interesting to you, it's like, how do I address not knowing what to do about this particular topic? And so I was kind of investigating cardiovascular disease risk in like trans people that are post HRT. And there's actually like a good body of data out there on this. There's several papers I was able to pull up, and still a little bit some conflicting data. But like as far as like my big thing with this particular question is kind of the phrasing of it, because like I think it's an important distinction to make between like just people being trans in general and their impact on like medical therapies versus specifically like specific interventions that trans people have had, because like other than the topics of like the trans women in sports and like the muscle mass and all that stuff that may have some differences within trans people versus cis people just at baseline, when we're talking about medications, like I think it's almost problematic to frame all trans people in the same boat there, because physiologically, if you're not under medical therapy, you're going to have at baseline the physiology that you were born with. And so you're, and since a lot of trans people aren't on medications, it's like, it's almost problematic to lump all of them in the same category, because I don't think that purely being trans or having a trans identity really relates to your like risks and benefits with certain medical therapies. That's going to base purely on your physiology kind of as it stands. If you've had medical therapy, that's where it's no longer necessarily a question of your identity. It's a question of what medications are you taking, what surgeries have you had. So I think it's more worthwhile to almost separate the question from the identity itself and more just based on your medical history. And there is a lot of data that suggests that, and this isn't even a far stretch, that if you are on medical therapies and you are undergoing hormonal changes, you're going to have physiologic differences compared to cis people of either side. We're finding that, of course, you're going to kind of have some hybrid risk. More of the question is the nuance of how much risk is different with certain therapies, and are you closer to the sex you were assigned at birth, or are you closer to the one that you're transitioning toward? Like, how much change do each of these therapies have? And that's something we're seeing that with, specifically going back to cardiovascular disease risk with trans women. I need to have like the data in front of me. It was like, for trans women, there wasn't like, they're kind of in the middle of cardiovascular disease risk. Like, they're not the same as cis men and also not really the same as cis women. I think from that side, they're closer to cis women in their risk, but still kind of in the middle in terms of like factors that would cause you to have more cardiac risk, like lipid levels, like diabetes risk, family history, age, like etc. Because of course you can modify the testosterone component, you can modify smoking, you can modify dietary habits, etc. But some more of those like non-modifiable risk factors might still be present. And the question kind of there is which factors are adjusted with hormone therapy and which ones aren't. And we're kind of seeing almost that there is an effect, especially probably with the cholesterol levels being majorly impacted by hormone therapy, because we see trans men having similar cardiovascular risk as cis men, probably due to testosterone influences on lipids. So like, I mean, even just going into this little bit of a monologue, there's a lot of nuance here with this particular question. But we do know that certain medication therapies do interact with other medication therapies. And so good reason to disclose kind of anything that you're taking, because we will need to know. And especially if for endocrine related conditions, primarily like some of the more common being thyroid diseases, like hyperthyroidism, those are ones that we really have to be careful about with hormones, because if you take Synthroid as a supplement for thyroid hormones, it can actually react like in the stomach with like oral estrogens, and so you can get less uptake of estrogen or less uptake of thyroid hormone, and so it needs to, like, because they can bind together. So that's one. You just need to adjust the doses, but you can still do both. Or what you do is you take one at one time of the day and the other at a different time of the day, or you just space it out differently so they're not taken at the same time. But yeah, there are certain interactions with different medications, and I do want to look into certain things like other endocrine conditions such as like PCOS and Addison's, etc. Just because I'm not as familiar with the literature right in front of me. But all of that to be said, that there is a good body of data out there so far, and I think it's still growing. It's just not as commonplace to be debated on the internet because people don't care as much.
Yeah, people are still too busy about talking about. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, people are always talking about trans people in sport, but then when they talk about non-binary people, they're just like, non-binary people shouldn't exist, because it's like the way they talk about trans people in sports inherently imply that there has to be two categories, which by their very logic, it breaks apart when they introduce even the notion of non-binary people or intersex people. But of course, they never actually get that far in their thinking and are just focused entirely on the binary notion. So the entire subject just becomes like a moot thing to even try to discuss, because like they fundamentally just don't understand biology isn't binary. But
yeah, this makes me think of like...
I could rant for a while about sports, but I'll try to avoid bringing that horse back out. So.
Sure. It is reminiscent of being out as a trans person before we had gay marriage legalized, and being like, oh man, I really do kind of feel like we're just waiting in line. Like, we're not even gonna get to the trans issues until that happens, like until gay people get federally recognized gay marriage. And now it feels probably to a lot of non-binary people like this feels for binary trans people, where it's like we're gonna have to hash out this whole fucking thing probably before we even start the conversation there. And yeah, I can imagine how frustrating that is. Sorry, I couldn't contribute on the medicine part. Ben did a great job, very thorough, and I had nothing to contribute.
No comments on Ben's stuff. I love all of that. I will be definitely trying to find some of the stuff, because finding it without a university login is hard, unfortunately.
Yeah, and real quick, like something that Kathleen made a really good point of in the side chat, and I guess like I subconsciously translate medical brain into just like common speech, so I don't consider it being something that you have to think about. But when you go to look for studies, if you're specifically looking for medical articles, you probably want to use GAHT or gender affirming hormone therapy to specifically pull the trans-related hormone therapy results, because if you search for HRT just by itself, you're probably going to get a lot of things related to like menopause. And while that's all great to talk about, it just might narrow your search a little bit more to use that term. So that's a very good point that was brought up in chat.
Right, that makes sense. I guess one other like sort of related one was, is there any sign of it impacting psychiatry? Because you always talked about like mostly physical diseases and disorders and medicine connected to that. Would that also then be the same thing when it comes to something like, say, depression or anxiety, where identity is like directly tied into that in some cases?
Well, I mean, I think it's still, and granted, I don't have the data in front of me, but like there isn't a lot of support in general for like gendered brains or anything, and any of our psychiatric medications are not dosed based on sex. So, and if you're giving hormone therapy basically to have somebody at physiologic levels for that particular sex, it's not really a consideration. Like, I'm sure that you could do some more study on it. Like, I'm sure it'd be interesting to look into and have some confirmatory data that says like, hey, this isn't a huge issue, or even if on the off chance that there is an issue, that could be something to look into. I think that would again more come into like the pharmacology side of like, is there a dosage like incompatibility, like with absorption for if you're taking an SSRI at the same time as hormone therapy. But As far as like what I know about the mechanisms and what I know about how we dose these, I don't see there really being an issue. But it is something, again, like I can do my homework on that and see if I can find some more data on it.
Okay, that makes sense. One thing I was curious about is when you mentioned GAHP study, is there any particular websites that you recommend for finding the actual raw studies other than like, I guess, the large databases, I imagine, that are locked behind scholarly paywalls?
That's hard because I have access to all of those. So like kind of my typical resource is PubMed. But again, there's a lot of paywalls with PubMed. I guess like maybe like and it's not guaranteed because I don't know your access to a lot of things, but you might be able to get access to some things like through a library if you have access to a library. Sometimes they have database accesses that you can at least, might not be able to get to all of them, but maybe look into your library and see what resources they have there. Otherwise, I don't know if Arden has any thoughts on getting past paywalls.
Nope.
I do know there's a paywall extension that I use, but that's very hit and miss. It sometimes works perfectly, and then there's some time where it doesn't find any way to get the article. So.
Nope. I have experienced the same frustrations where I love reading research and data, and I would happily go through so much of it, but ever since I left school, I can't. It's really difficult. I've had to ask people I know who are, in the medical field or in the education field to get me access to stuff, because, and even then it's hard because it's like, you're doing this like proxy thing where I'm like, oh, I want to search for this, and then they don't know exactly what you want, so they're trying to put in those search terms and give you something relevant. It's a hot mess. They really need to work out a consumer model for data and stuff. But anyway,
yeah, well, Aaron Sport, if you're familiar with him, he literally tried to go radical and release all the publicly available articles, and like for lack of a better term, the political systems that protect those copyrights really went hard on him. So if there's one thing I've learned from that, it's going to be a long battle before stuff like that is, like, if we can't even get the COVID vaccine to be open source when it literally affects the entire planet, it would have been a huge like social good, at least in the short term. If we can't get that open to the public, then I imagine most of medical research is going to be locked for a long time. But I'm not a doctor, so obviously don't know if that's changing or not.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Violet. Hopefully you got a much more thorough answer than you got when you called in with Katy and I on this. But I appreciate you calling back.
Lots of documents already that I've found, so definitely start reading into those.
Cool. Awesome. Love having a doctor on hand of the show. It is huge. Thank you so much, Violet.
Even a sleep-deprived one. Yeah. Thanks for letting me monologue for a minute. It was great.
No problem. It was great. Thanks, Violet.
All right.
Alrighty.
And then real quick before we go into super chats, just along the points of that last call, and we've talked about this before on the show, but like, please do not privately message me asking me for research, because I will not read your message, and I will be very angry because I don't sleep, and having notifications that I'm not going to read is extra stressful. So please, please don't message me.
We've talked about this before with regard to like asking anyone on the line for help finding stuff and research. Like, you have to realize that is an actually somewhat labor intensive job. Like, finding a study that actually demonstrates, your point or supports something that you're trying to find is not exactly easy all the time. And I don't have a compendium on hand of all the studies that I've read in the past. So it's like, I can't just hand it to you. It is definitely disrespectful. Before we go on to super chats, where if you give us $5 or more in a super chat, we will read them out loud. I want to address Nora in the chat, who's been asking a lot of jacking off questions, and that's JAQing, just asking questions off. Call in. You came in late to the show and then couldn't get in the call. That's fine. Call into the show. If I have to explain to you why it's wrong to misgender a person or dead name a person, but it's not wrong for me to call X Twitter. You need to call in. That level of basic misunderstanding can't be sorted out in the live chat. So, yeah, anyway, now that that's been addressed, let's move on to super chats. Let me make sure I got the right thing up first, because I usually do a test one, and I hate when those go through. Sorry, I've got new shortcut keys, and I'm trying to remember where everything is. There we go. Yeah, you want to go first?
Yeah, let's do it. $5 from Jason Jones. Hashtag Team Arden. Set me up to read hashtag Team Arden. Okay.
You're right, I did.
I'm saving paychecks to buy a hoggy from y'all, so kiss that lovably grumpy old sailor of yours. Yeah, so this is clearly meant to be a super chat for you. They want to buy your animals.
So our hog noses are still very young. We were able to get the ball pythons breeding fast because there are adult breeder ready ball pythons that are accessible on the market, like everywhere, who could still breed. Hog noses are such a niche market that it's really difficult to find a healthy adult breeder ready to start a business. So we've bought all baby hog noses and are raising them up from scratch. So it's going to be probably 3+ years before we actually produce our own hog noses. But if you want ball pythons or crested geckos, we got you covered. But thank you anyway. I appreciate it. And I'll make sure to give Matt a kiss and tell him it's from you. Also, I don't have a way to keep track of the score here. Oh, and that covers Ben's face, which I hate. So,
see, you hate it, but Katy would love it if it covered my face.
Katy would love it.
Katy would make it bigger and cover my entire face.
Can I let me move this? I'm just gonna close it. I can't get the point system working today. If somebody in the chat wants to try to keep track, you can feel welcome to, but as I mentioned before, I'm on a new production PC, and we've not completely changed, but we very radically changed a lot of aspects about production since I got this new production PC. And so it's been a very bumpy road. Anyone who called in to Dying Out Loud on Tuesday knows there was a awful echo that all of the Dylan, our mod, tried to call in, and they were getting like that thing where your voice comes back 2 seconds later, so it just disrupts your ability to think about anything. And I felt so bad. Our callers were like, what is happening? And half of us were like, oh, it's probably on your end. No, it was us. It was all us. And it was bad. Anyway, we've got $4.99 from Ramona. Not able to watch live today, so I'm sending in my vote for hashtag Team Arden early. Thank you.
$4.99 from Amethyst McLeish. Hashtag Team Pebbles because it's Dr. Ben. How can you not? Arden's lovely too. And oh, go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Well, Jimmy's not even here to go fuck himself. He's probably already doing that somewhere.
Sure.
Probably. I don't know what Jimmy does with his spare time, but I can just imagine it's that just all the time. But thank you for the hashtag Team Pebbles. She's been okay. I want to talk a little bit about how Pebbles has been a little shit lately. I know I love Pebbles. She's great, but she's been a little shit. She learned that she can climb on top of her water bottle, and so she's been knocking it over like every day. And so I have to switch her to like just a water bowl because this is unacceptable. And like, Pebbles, you are knocking over your water every single day and spilling it everywhere. And this is just like not okay. And then I walk over and she's acting like this isn't a problem. And I'm like, of course you are, because you know you're adorable. But we're having some fun times with Pebbles. But yeah, she's been a little shit. I still love her. But
that's great.
I
love
right now.
animals when they can make a mess and know that you have to clean it, and then they're like, "I'll do it again." Like,
yeah.
Oh, it's so funny. All right, and we have a cursed message from Sean Isherwood. £5 from Sean Isherwood. If a triangle has sides lengths A, B, and C, and area delta, whatever that means, then a squared plus b squared plus c squared is less than or equal to 4 a tilde 3 delta. No fucking clue what any of that meant. With equality if and only if the triangle is equilateral. I like almost.
Sean gets enjoyment for watching us struggle to even read it, which is fine. That's fine.
I almost followed until there was the capital A with a tilde 3 delta. I'm like, what the fuck is that? You have to realize.
What language is this?
The only math I took in college, other than behavioral statistics, which is all about reading research and how to understand how a study is valid. The only math I took in college was statistics, and I only took it because I told my counselor I want the lowest level math course that will satisfy my credit requirements, and that is all I am willing to take. And he was like, that's unfortunate, but okay, it's this one. And I was like, thank you. That is all I need from you, sir. My counselor did not like me either. I think he was low-key a little homophobic, but what you gonna do?
50 sex, because I'm going to keep calling them sex because it's funny. 50 sex from Puck Tholander. Finally, Thursday, my favorite show, hashtag Team Dr. Ben. Go fuck yourself, lovely Arden. I mean, as much as I want to support being allowed to go fuck yourself, I'd appreciate it if Arden did not do that right now, and if she waited until after the show.
Yeah, there's time and place.
I didn't have to be in the room. Yeah.
True. I support that. Big fan of consent, personally. All right, we've got €5 from Andrew Batea. Not everyone who voted in the poll is a Takis viewer. The Line has other more boring shows. Hashtag Team Ben. That's true. I'm sure this show specifically has a higher trans audience than the rest of the shows on the network. But and polls are actually the reason we use polls. If you don't know, it's because polls are a little bit easier to get to reach non-subscribers in the audience who watch the shows, or might watch shows that are peripheral, who would get recommended to similar viewers. Polls go out to a way more diverse audience than a lot of video recommendations do, so that's why we use polls. But yeah, so I'm sure the audience is also broader than even just the one here at the Line. But still interesting.
$5 from Don't Follow Doug. Thanks for making the world a better place and helping me become a better person. Thank you for your super chat. And I guess I won't follow your account because it tells me not to follow. I'm just going to follow your instructions and not follow Doug. Don't follow Doug.
That's right. Don't follow Doug. But I'm glad we helped you be a better person. That's amazing. Usually I think I make people worse. 10 pounds from Jackie Greenland. Shout out to my lovely friend Ellie, who is in for her GCS tomorrow morning. That's so exciting. Wow. Going to miss her at work for the next couple of months of recovery, but go her. Hashtag Team Arden. Well, thank you so much for the hashtag Team Arden, and congrats to your friend. That is really exciting. Oh, man. GCS is so huge. I would love to get there sometime soon, but so many factors preventing. So many.
€5 from Andrew Botea. I identify as having gender apathy, still cis though, for a while before I realized the pronouns they, them gave me gender euphoria. Hashtag Team Arden. It's great.
Nice.
We're all getting a little bit of self-discovery. Love to see it.
Yeah, that's definitely... That's why I think I was with you, Ben, on that. I had heard gender apathy as more of a philosophical way to convey an experience rather than necessarily an identity label. I think agender is the label that is closely associated with this. That is not the feeling. That's why gender apathetic people can be cis. Although I know people push back on me about cis people using they, them. I find very interesting and curious, and how you qualify as cis if you use they, them pronouns. But that's a conversation for a call on another day. Or
yeah. That'd be a great call.
Is this you? I think it's
is it me? $5. All right,
it is now.
That's fine. $5 from Melissa Nguyen. GC are okay with selective service registration being male only. If MRAs, women's rights groups, and the ACLU all disagree with you, you might be wrong. Yeah, there's like a whole thing with the selective service, or just, like, I just think that it should just not exist at all for anybody. So I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like that's a lot of our takes too. But like also, if someone were to be on the side of maintaining a selective service, like, there's absolutely no reason why you can't also draft women. Like, there's plenty of, like, even among the debate of like combat roles versus non-combat roles, like, there are plenty of jobs that like anybody could do, regardless of, like, I mean, as long as you are like medically qualified, like, to do said jobs. Like, again, I do not think the draft should exist at all. But if it did have to exist, then I don't see any reason why it wouldn't apply to everybody that would be adult and qualified to serve.
Yeah, so I would never want to be in the military at all. I was so irritated when I turned 18. I didn't know selective service was a thing until I turned 18, and people were like, "Oh, you have to do this," and I was like, "Excuse me, what?" I can see how a government with a very large body and a lot of assets to protect might need something like that in place for like very emergency circumstances. I have very complex feelings about it, but I'm not educated enough on it to know what the right position is. But I would agree, if we're going to have it, I don't see why it wouldn't be for every citizen that is over 18. Yeah. 50 Canadian dollars from Kathleen Moncrief. Hashtag Team Takis is the best. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for your alleged dollars. We appreciate your support so much, and your great thoughts you're adding in chat. They are alleged dollars.
Alleged dollars. 100. I know it doesn't specifically spell sex, but I'm gonna call it the Czech sex, because I know all the kroner and the krona and all the things all sound kind of the same, so they're all sex in my opinion. Everything is sex. Someone's gonna clip that out, and it's gonna be someone's gonna clip that out. It's gonna be weird. 100 sex from Naresh. I got nothing funny to say right now, but if you can say hi to Bree for me, a friend from Discord who watches Takis episodes eventually, she'll let me know in a month maybe. Well, hi Bree. Hi Bree. I don't know if I know you. I might know you. I don't know. I don't know if I
know Avery. I don't know who watches our shows.
I know Avery. I don't know if this is the same Bree, but
me either.
Either way, hi Bree.
Now I kind of want you watch this. We've got $5 from Samantha Shepard. Great show as always. Thank you, Samantha.
$5 from Piao Meow Noir. This is Benjamin. Benjamin here. Lovely to talk once again. I may be an ace, but I'm still pretty straight on the goal of acceptance for all. Have a nice day. Thank you for your call today, and thank you for your lovely message, and your username is pretty great.
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, Piao Meow Noir. Is that a reference to something? Yeah. Or just Meow Noir?
I don't know. It sounds cool though.
It does sound cool. $10 from Mo Scoville. What's up, Mo? Great conversation this week. Fantastic as always to see Dr. Ben, but hashtag Team Arden. Thank you, Mo. The company that I worked with Mo through recently put my face on a calendar that they're producing. I didn't even know it was happening. I just woke up this morning and was tagged in a tweet, and I'm the month of March. So, you know,
what is this calendar?
If you like spicy content, you should go to my Twitter. You'll see the calendar there and where you can get it.
It's that kind of calendar.
It's that kind of calendar.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mo's awesome though. I love Mo.
Yeah. $9.99 from Balthazar 228. Is the International Chess Federation just scared that trans people are able to turn kings into queens and vice versa?
I mean,
that's a great little.
If you turn your king into a queen, could you ever lose the game? How could you possibly lose the game if your king's a queen?
Yeah, you can't.
You can't check.
Right. Right.
Maybe they're onto something. You know, maybe trans people are a threat.
Maybe
to chess. Or maybe we should just make it all open and not have a women's category. Like, you stupid women, you need your own place to compete because you can't compete with the men. Like, it's great because
So stupid.
there's so many sexist people when all that happened who were like defending it or whatever. But I like that even Magnus Carlsen, like the arguably best chess player to ever exist, made a statement once of like how chess needs to be more accepting to women because chess has been historically so cruel to women, and there's no reason that they shouldn't be able to compete. Like, it's just, yeah, you know, when the person who's the better at the game than literally anyone who's ever existed disagrees with your position, it's like, but I don't know if he supports the ban, so I should be careful what I'm saying. Listen to me, right? $5 Canadian from Rosie Raid. We're hashtag Team
That's
Ben
Val.
because, oh, cool.
Yeah, that's Val. Yeah.
Because he's my dungeon master, and I figured this is a great way for me to get inspiration. Very nice. Thanks for calling. I appreciate you very much.
You will now all refer to me as Dungeon Daddy in the side chat. Just
God.
saying.
Oh, God.
Just to make Arden cringe a lot. It's great. I get satisfaction out of that.
I'm glad someone has to.
$5 from Charlie Carrot. Love y'all. Thanks for doing the show. Thank you, Charlie Carrot, for giving the super chat and for watching.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. €5 from Andrew Batea. What about over-the-counter medications? Doctors will, of course, take your medical history into account, but are those nuances in the leaflets? Hashtag Team Ben.
Well, you should be talking to your doctor about what over-the-counter medications you're using. That factors in as, like, are you taking medications? These count as medications. So it's not taken account into the leaflets because you're not going to list every single medication side effect in the leaflet. That's kind of ridiculous. There are, like, for like physicians and pharmacists and other providers, like there are resources that we use to kind of determine if there are drug interactions. So kind of your best course of action is to talk to your doctor about if there are going to be any reactions. Like you can specifically ask, like, hey, I'm starting this medication. Like, are there any over-the-counter things that are going to have a negative interaction? And that's a good conversation for you to have with them.
Yeah, I use like drugs interaction. Is that like what the website's called? I always just type drugs.
Yeah, there's like drugs.com or something, which sounds like a
drugs.com,
terrible
and they have like a whole interaction thing where you put in a drug and you click OK, and then you put in the next drug and it'll list all potential side effects that are known. I do that for like literally everything, even over the counter stuff. I'm surprised more people don't do that. £5 from Samantha Patrick, hashtag Team Arden.
£5 from Samantha Patrick, hashtag Team Dr. Ben. You were, Samantha, you kind of waffle between being a VIP for one particular person and then being a fence sitter. And so like, I love seeing your comments, but like, I don't know if I can trust your votes. Like this is just a thing that keeps coming up. I don't know if I trust it.
It does make someone like kind of weird, you know, like where do you fall though? Really? 20 Australian dollars allegedly from Shaw 2 cents. I'm going for 10 for each Arden and Ben. You're both awesome. Hashtag Team Takis. Thanks, Takis. I learned so much. So wrapped to, I feel like maybe that was an autocorrect or something, to finally catch a live show and be able to send a super chat. Or that's like an Australian slang term that I just don't know. Either way, I'm glad you're able to catch it live, and thank you for sending a super chat to support. We really appreciate it.
$126 from Pedro Glosser. What's the saying again? If you ain't got nothing funny to say, just give them money or something like that. I mean, I don't think it was the phrase, but you know, I'm not opposed to it. Like, this sounds like a great... Now it just sounds like we're begging for money.
No, that's the saying for sure. I definitely, that is absolutely the saying. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right on that. I think there's also another saying where if you got nothing to say, you should send more money again. That's also what I've heard.
Yeah.
We got $5 from Jason Jones. Hashtag Team Dr. Ben. I forgot about pebbles. You can kiss sailors as well. We do have a reputation. Katie would make it bigger and cover my whole face. Oh my. Nice.
Oh no. $5 from Dylan Fooler with its pronouns. I also don't mind them, but I feel I don't really have space to tell people that I don't mind them, so I just put it in my bios.
Cool.
And again, this is the whole discussion that I think we'd love to have more conversations about.
Yeah. Again, its pronouns I have fewer issues with than my issues with neopronouns generally, which are few and far between, and again, are couched between how I feel about it doesn't necessarily determine whether it's valid or whether you should or shouldn't use it or whether I should or shouldn't use it for you. But I have less issue with it. It's purely on the fact that it is an existing pronoun in the English language, so it's not. It is usable in my brain. We've got 100 check sex from Naresh again, producer. I vote for her. # Team Arden. Also, if sec are sex, can mine be checks? Checks? Is there a way to say that where you can get sex in there?
Yeah, I just want to say sex. Like,
Naresh said we missed. Is it this one, Naresh? Because they go in the order that if I get them, they will go in the chronological order that they come in. If I get them in the thing at all. So, no worries. Just wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything. I did a check before we started to make sure I had all the ones that were there at the time we started, but sometimes I miss them as we're going because they'll happen so fast.
£5 from Sean Isherwood. It should be a squared plus b squared plus c squared is greater or equal to 4 times the root of 3 times delta. The square root symbol. Oh, the square root symbol didn't copy and paste. And it's Weizenbach's inequality. I love some of the the fun naming thing. Like Weizenbach sounds really cool. I like that.
It is
a
good name. Feels satisfying to say. That makes more sense. At least that's a symbol. I would be like, okay, I've seen that in math before. So
I've seen that in math before.
Where I was fucking like A with a little tilde. I'm like, what the fuck is that? Where has that ever been in math? You have to be like a fucking PhD mathematician to have seen that goddamn symbol. Okay. €5 from Andrew Butea. To clarify, I realized that my gender apathy was just being non-binary and a trench coat, but I did identify as cis before that. # Team Ben. Yeah, wait, was this the conversation about being cis and using they, them?
Oh, yeah, I think this was in response to that.
Okay. Yeah, I even if somebody is, non-binary and like an egg that's cracking and they don't know it and they identify as cis currently and they're using they, them, I don't have a problem with that. It just, to me, I have a hard time seeing why someone would want to identify outside of the gender that they were assigned at birth in any capacity if they aren't trans. Like, that seems like you are taking on... I've heard some people do it as sort of an activist thing where it's like, I want to normalize they, them, so I'm going to use they, them to normalize it. But to me, I feel like the reason to use a pronoun is because it works for you. And if it works for you, then are you not cis? But not trying to police anyone's gender or how they identify. Those are the questions that come to my mind when I hear someone who's cis use they, them pronouns.
$5 from John S. Thank you. The work you do is so important. Thank you, John, for your contribution.
I'm glad you think so. I'm not always so convinced, but it keeps showing up. So
yeah,
people keep saying
We're
it.
still
I'm
here.
like, all right, if you
We're
say
still
so. $5 from Bada. Thanks again for taking my call. Do the thing that scares the shit out of you, and then get the courage, right? Oh, yeah, yes. Do the thing that gives you the relief of taking a big shit, and then you get courage. That's definitely how it works. # Team Arden.
Mm-hmm.
No, there is a bit of a... I realize it sucks. This is the same with like fitness, and I've fallen off the wagon just a little bit. But there is like a just do it part. Like there is like a hurdle where you do have to just do it, and that is all there is to it. Even when it's really, really uncomfortable to do so. But again, most people are not gonna care or notice that you are in the space, and the people who do and might judge you, they're entitled to do that, and it doesn't, remove your right to access that space. That's kind of was the point I was trying to get at. But yes, my poop analogy. Thank you for bringing it back.
The poop analogy. 100. I'm just keeping to say sex from Naresh. Oh, hello. I sent that last super chat before Ben read the first one from me. That deserves a hashtag Team Ben. Check sex are also cool. Yes.
Nice.
All the check sex.
Uh,
All kinds of sex is great.
We got $5 from Stephanie. Stephanie Helms. Hey, Stephanie. Get some sleep. Hashtag Team Dr. Ben. Are you going to even get to sleep after this?
Spoiler alert. No, I'm going to work after this. This is actually my morning.
So
I work a 7 to 7. So, yes, I'm going to find some food and then go to work.
I am so sorry. That is terrible.
It's fine. It's fine.
I used to work third shift, and I remember feeling dead all the time.
Yeah. 5 Australian from Chateau Sense. It's like a rapper name. Arden, what a trip. I didn't know Wrapped was an Aussie thing. Well picked, I guess. Votes in. Hashtag Team Arden.
It might be broader than just Aussie. I'd never heard of it. So if it's also a UK thing, it's lost on me. Let me add this. $5 from Dylan Fuller. Cis people using they, them doesn't feel too different from he, him lesbians, gay men and drag using she, her, and non-binary people using he or she. It feels different to me in a very particular way. Whereas when gay men in drag are using she, her, it is because they are becoming a character. And those characters' pronouns, in theory, are she, her. And that's kind of what's going on there. He, him lesbians, I feel like, to me, is a more of a conversation on the way that non-binary and transmasculine people who used to be in the lesbian community might still identify within the lesbian community. That's more of what I've seen from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then non-binary people using he or she feels uncontroversial to me because if you're non-binary, you kind of just get to be whatever the fuck you use, whatever words you want, because you're not like ascribing yourself to a group. Cis people using they, them to me very much feels like a non-trans person using an identity label that would indicate you are trans in some capacity. And that's where the block happens for me. I think those things seem to be distinct to me. Not that they're invalid or that people shouldn't do it. Not what I'm saying. Just that they feel different to me for a very particular reason regarding the definition of trans being like not identifying with your sex assigned at birth. And that is usually conveyed through pronouns or expression. And I know it doesn't have to be necessarily, but it almost always is. So that's why I'm just saying questions come up when someone's using that for me. Sounds to me like an egg.
€5 from Andrew Botea. To clarify again, I thought I had gender apathy, but then I realized they them gave me euphoria, which made it clear I was not, in fact, cis. Hashtag Team Arden. Yeah. So
that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Definitely, yeah.
I'm like, if you use they them and you're like, yeah, that's right for me. I'm like, if you use they them and you feel like it's right for you, are you actually cis, or are you a person who's using they them not because it feels right for you, but because you think you're doing some sort of protest thing? Which, yeah. Anyway, that has been the show. We got to do a little bit of space, tiny bit, not really, but I think the pronoun thing could. Oh, we got. Hold on.
Oh, we got another one.
Naresh. 100 check sex from Naresh. Czechs, dollars, check sex, anything but Czechoslovakian crowns. Slovaks embrace the euro. We have not. Got it.
Oh, yeah.
Czech sex is valid, is what Naresh is saying. Anyway, so thank you guys for being here. Thank you, of course, to our mods for doing all the work. I see Alyssa, Dylan. I got cookies. I'm sure there were others. Stephanie must be in chat because she sent a super chat. Yep, there she is. And thank you to Jess for cost creating. You did a great job. Hopefully we get that pronoun caller in soon. But yeah, Ben, did you want to do any sign-off stuff before we head out?
No, I'm tired. Let's go.
All right, let's get the fuck out of here. See you guys. See you losers. See you losers. Get in, losers. We're gonna watch these credits slowly scroll up the screen.
Yeah.
While we listen to this.
I don't know what to do with this part.
Hot beat.